everybody. Welcome back to the Captain's Quadrant. We are excited to have a very special Section 31 and a half as we have questions. And we're here with the amazing FX and makeup artist, Thomas Surprenant. How are you, sir? Welcome back to the Captain's Quadrant.
Hi. Hanging in there.
Hanging in there. It's funny. The last time you were here, I think I was sick. And I didn't want to just hack and wheeze on the whole thing. So I had a friend of the show stand in my stead who is getting her, I guess, podcast bones, so to speak. So I'm very glad that I now have the opportunity to talk to you, even though we talk a lot.
Yeah, and I like that. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I feel very honored, actually.
Is Thomas our first returning guest?
So in a way, I think David Jones and Michael Chen were both returning.
Oh, that's true. Okay, so he's number 3. Number 3 is good.
Yeah. 3 for 3.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get into the earliest. We've chatted on the phone, and one of the things that I loved learning about was how you broke into the business.
Okay.
You can tell me. Tell us what you can tell us, and whatever you can't.
Okay. Let's see. Most of my immediate family worked in the film industry, and I was discouraged because, they wanted me to get a normal job and something more reliable than the film industry has turned out to be. It's kind of weird. Maybe they knew something I didn't. Anyway, but I grew up with a family of artists, and I grew up around art and doing art, and my immediate family loved sci-fi and horror. We would all gather around the television watching Star Trek, TOS, and anything sci-fi. And then, Friday and Saturday night when the late night horror shows were on, we'd all gather around with snacks and, watch classic films and B films and all that. So, I would sculpt and I would paint, and, years later, An American Werewolf in London came out, and I was like, I want to do this. I want to make monsters. And
a great movie to be based in for what you wanted to do. Yeah.
So many of us too, like my age group, it was just like, it hit us in our teens, and we're like, this is so cool. I want to do this. And, it was the early 80s, and we had, Dick Smith doing The Hunger, and of course, The Howling and The Beast Within and all these different films, and so I started reaching out to people. I think it was 13, and I got the North Hollywood phone book at my uncle's place, and Rick Baker had his number listed back then. And I called and I talked to his first wife, and, I just started cold calling people, and I got invited to a shop, and, got to see giant rats and monsters, and I started being told, where to go to pick materials up. And my grandfather had so many friends who worked in the industry, the Westmores and stuff. He worked with Michael on Capricorn 1, a highly underrated film. And Marvin Westmore, who was my first real mentor. And then, I met Bill Tuttle, the Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe, Logan's Run, which for some reason I've been seeing this pop up a lot. A lot of people, young people, are reviewing it, and some people really hate it. It's 2.5 hours long or whatever. And, and then, some people, I don't know if you've been noticing, but that's kind of got relevant again. But I just started making stuff, taking pictures, bringing stuff in and showing, these old timers, and just word of mouth. Just started talking to people, and ended up getting my first, the first project I worked on was Return of the Living Dead 2. And then I don't know how it happened, but I started meeting people, and I ended up meeting, John Quinn. And he was co-writer, I believe, and the director for a film. Working title was Bloody Pom Poms, and then it got changed to Cheerleader Camp. The foreign distribution was, they kept the title Bloody Pom Poms, but anywho, that was like the first film I department headed, and it's just a low budget slasher film, and I just started meeting people, and it was the 80s, and I ended up going to a meeting to interview with Lorenzo Lamas for a film he was doing. And
wow.
Super nice guy. He was married to Kathleen Kinmont. And, of course, I was like, you're the bride of the Reanimator, and I just started, meeting more people and getting hired for different things. And it was weird. So many of my early things were like cop crime kind of things and kickboxer films, because those were easy to make, cheap to do. And, so I got to work with a lot of legendary stunt people. And then they actually started spreading, the word about me, and ended up doing some fire masks for, Batman Returns. And that was my first experience with like the Batman franchise. And it was amazing. The sets were incredible. It's like, when you're seeing something in person, you wish you could visually take that in and record it so other people could see what you saw. The sets were magnificent. I love it.
That's still my favorite Batman, by the way.
It's so good, and I was talking to, one of my younger friends the other day about Paul Rubens being in it, and they're like, no, he wasn't. And I'm like,
very beginning.
He's the Penguin's father. And and he's like, well, I'm gonna have to go back and watch it. That's my favorite Batman. I'm like, you've seen it more than once, you should know that. But then again, a lot of people don't know Paul without the Pee-wee makeup and stuff. But anyhow, Marvin Westmore, I ended up teaching at a school for about 10 years. And he pulled me in on this television series, and you guys, and I'm going to say, this in a nice way, we're all geeks here. You probably will remember Space Rangers.
Yeah. I remember Space Rangers.
Yeah. And it's sad because it really wasn't a bad show. It just didn't have a budget. And, we had TNG, and the first season, I think the first season of DS9 started at that point. And anyway, so I was on that with the legendary Ed French. He amazing career. And I then got a call from a friend to come and work on a movie called Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Little known.
And I remember the first night we were filming at like Griffith Park by the old carousel, and like the old zoo, that went back, I think it was in the late 40s, 50s or something. And now the LA Zoo is like a big deal. But anyway, so there's this whole area, where this old carousel is, and they set up on some of it like the cemetery where Buffy first goes out with Donald Sutherland, and the first two vampires come out of the ground, and it was interesting. That first night I'm hanging out in the makeup trailer, and Christy Swanson was swatting a bee, and I'm like, don't kill the bee, and just like, let me handle it. I walked up and I let the bee crawl on me, and I took it outside, and I was like, don't do that. They're really important, and she was like, okay, you just let a bee crawl on. Anyway, and that kind of bonded something between us. Anyway, it was just a weird experience, but anyway, at least I get to share this,
Yeah, it's amazing. Who knew the bees would bring people together?
And also another movie with Paul Rubens.
Yeah, no, that's
right.
Yeah. And I ended up on that, and that was like a family. And we were filming nights. I think it was like close to 40 nights we shot. And so you're just dead. I mean, and you're going into work in the afternoon, working all night. And we had some fun locations like Universal Backlot, where they filmed, the classic horror films, and the old European town set. And it was all dressed for like, the Crusades. And it was just amazing to be there, with the horses and the torches and everything. And when you're backlot and you're filming at night, you kind of walk around, and get to see things that people on the tour never get to see, and take pictures, and avoid raccoons at all costs. And there's like colonies of raccoons and animals living there, because it is, the hills, and there's deer, and it's just hard to believe that in LA there's actually still an ecosystem. But we became so close on that. Like all the actors, we were like family. And we would, hang out with them outside of work, which was really just such a wonderful bonding experience. Like Rutger Hauer, one of my favorite actors. Like Blade Runner changed my life, and as anyone into sci-fi, that movie is just, it's just Ridley Scott. What can I say? And it was a really odd thing because I cook, and our department head, Michelle Bueller, her husband at the time, he was Italian from Italy, and he would cook. And so he would come and like bring stuff to like Rutger or Paul's trailer and do these lavish, like Northern Italian meals. And we were like, whoa. And then I would do like Thai food, and, I'd go into Paul's trailer, I brought my wok, and I would like cook Thai food and stuff like that. And we would all sit, and gosh, this was a million years ago. Somebody would bring wine. It was like each night a different person brought wine. And Michelle, she's like half French and lived in France, grew up in France and stuff. And so it was a very French thing. And then our costume designer was from France. And so there was this whole European kind of aesthetic, and we'd sit there and, drink wine and eat like good food, but yeah, just Christy and Luke, and just everybody. It was just, young David Arquette bouncing off the walls. It's such a great guy. But it was such an amazing experience. I've had some great experiences on shows, but nothing like that. That one, it was like, even as hard as, some of the days were, or nights, it was so much fun because everyone was there to have a good time and make this a fun experience. And it didn't feel like work. And, I hold on to that because a lot of shows that I've been on since, not like that. Or if you're coming into, we call it day checking, like Star Trek, for instance, you had your, people in the department and they were there Monday through Friday. And then, we'd have a heavy Klingon day. And so, a bunch of us would come in and do Klingons, and, and then, might not work on Star Trek for another month or two. It was never that long, but anyway, with this show, we bonded so well. And some shows you walk in and it's like they've got their system and the actors are standoffish or, what have you. And, that was such a great experience. And then, years later, like when Luke would be on a show, like friends of mine are like, hey, you're on Buffy. And he's like, yeah. And it's like, do you remember Tom? And he's like, oh my gosh, Tom, and, I'd always get these messages, or, like text or somebody would call and say, hey, Luke says hi, and, talk to Christy, over the last X amount of years, like we kind of bounce into each other. And I worked with Rutger later. Paul used to always send us Christmas cards every year. Oh, wow. And, just when I was living in LA, Paul would come over for dinner, and, he loved Thai food.
Yeah, you left a mark in his stomach. So
right. I don't remember his makeup, but boy, that pad Thai.
Yeah, sure. What about his noodles? Let's talk
about
that. Jeez, man.
So.
Oh, well, what has been your absolute favorite makeup creation that you have ever been involved with? Just something that just left such a strong impression with you that you just keep going back to in your mind over and over and over again.
When you work on shows like Star Trek, you get to do a lot of stuff, and like sometimes we'd get like the one-off aliens, and we could have fun with them. And just an odd one. It was, oh gosh, I can't remember the episode. You guys might remember. It was the last time on TNG that we saw Ro Laren, and
Preemptive Strike.
I knew he was good. No, I was like, that's right up his alley.
Thank you. And okay, so come with me to the bar that Ro was at, and there was a scene where there was like this background lady, and she was like a prostitute, and without saying you're a prostitute, right? It's like, here she is, and Sir Patrick was directing the episode, and it was a weird story because when I walked into the makeup room, I had my setup, and there were prosthetics laid out for me, and the forehead was kind of like not sexy, and I was like, oh, that's gonna be fun. I did the makeup and everything, and Mike's like, that's not the forehead I had for you. And I'm like, well, that was what was on my station. And Mike seemed a little perturbed that somebody switched out the forehead. But I made it work. And I did like some gold and like fire reds and stuff. And she had like this red wig with like gold, like streaks going through it. And Mike's like, I love the makeup. You really made it work. That's not the forehead I had lined up. And it was much more feminine. And you made this kind of clunky thing, work really well. And he goes, I love the lashes. I just happened to have some like kind of drag queeny lashes. They were like gold mylar and like red mylar. And because everything was like this gold and red theme, I just kept with it. And he's like, yeah, you just need to run it by Patrick. He wasn't Sir Patrick at the time. And I'm like, Patrick? And he's like, Patrick Stewart. And I'm like, okay. He's like, he's directing the episode. And I'm like, okay. Like, I spoke to the other actors. I just never approached the captain, so I had to go find him, and like my heart's beating, and I think I'm sweating, and I was like, it's like this. It's just kind of cold meeting him, without Mike there or anybody, and I went up to him and I'm like, Mr. Stewart, and he was like, yes, and it was Mike Westmore wanted me to run this makeup by you because there's like an interaction or something I believe, and he was like, well, let's go see her, and so we walked over to the set, and she was there, and he's like, could you point her out? And I'm like, her over there, and we walked over, and he's like looking at her and looking at the makeup, and he's like, excellent job. And I was like, oh my God. So I may have peed a little, but it was impressive, to have had that moment. But there were little moments like that where I did something that felt good for me. But like things that I've got to create, it's weird because when you're working on a show, there's a lot of other input, and a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I was privileged. One of my buddies from Star Trek, makeup artist Michael Key, he went on to start a magazine called the Makeup Artist Magazine and produce these makeup shows all over the world called IMATS, International Makeup Artist Trade Show, which sadly we don't have those anymore. COVID kind of killed a lot, and that was one of the things that kind of fell apart. And it was kind of like going to a sci-fi convention but for makeup. And they were crazy, and there were makeup competitions, and people, I was selling products and stuff that I manufacture, and things were good back then. Anyway, I got to create makeups to do and demo in front of people to sell products, and I got to do things that they were 100% me, and ideas that I had. But as far as film, like, I have makeups that I've done that other people were, they'll remember, and it's odd. Like, just certain things, like Martok, I got to do JG's, I established his makeup.
I'm going to run that picture really quick because I love it.
And I just got to work with JG last year again. I hadn't seen him in however many years it's been since we worked on DS9, and he's just such a lovely man. And
a lot of fun.
And then this is going to sound so silly, but we amongst fanboy effects makeup people, we have our heroes like Jeffrey Combs, and I've never got to do Jeffrey Combs's makeup until last year on the cruise. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I told him, we were like, in this cabin, and I was doing his makeup, for this show he was doing with like Nana, I think. And anyway, it was one of Nana's like things that she does. But anyway, so I'm gluing Vulcan ears on him. And he's like, can you do it quickly? And before we started, and I'm like, give me like 10 minutes or whatever. He's like, you're kidding. And it's just years. It's muscle memory. You just throw it down. And it didn't need to be like for television or anything. He was on a stage. And, when we were talking, I said, this is really an honor. And he's like, and I'm like, yeah, it's going to sound like I'm ass kissing or something, but no, you're a legend amongst us, like our group of people. It's, we are huge fans of yours. And one of the things is because you are good in makeup. It's like Doug Jones, or Douglas Tate, these are suit actors, and they've made their living being covered in rubber and silicone, and they've done some outstanding work. And when you get to work with somebody like that, who isn't, a complainer or whatever, it's really a big deal. It's kind of like if you're an actor and you get to work with, I don't know, who's huge and really good.
Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, sure. I was thinking like Dame Judith Dench, but just recently we lost the wonderful Catherine O'Hara. I mean, if you were an actor, working with her, would have been a joy. She was one of the nicest people I've ever encountered, and I worked with her twice. And we were in Austin, Texas, and actually got to hang out with her personally. It was her and a couple people, and we went to dinner, and then we hit a couple nightclubs and stuff, and listened to live music, and had a few drinks. And she was one of the smartest people as well, and her comedic timing. I mean, it was just. And the first time I met her, I brought up this one character she did years ago on SCTV, and it was funny. She remembered it line for line and had me laughing and rolling. Like my gut hurt from like just bent over laughing because she that many years later could remember this character. It was the character's name was Margaret, and it was like and Gene was doing like Alex Trebek, and it was like Night School Jeopardy or something like that, and like he would like say the category, and she would ring her buzzer before he'd ask the question, and he's like, and she would be like, ABBA, and he's like, no, it's not ABBA. Somebody disconnect her buzzer, you know. And anyway, yeah, it was, yeah, and it was amazing, you know. So, but I think Jimmy Duvall, getting back to the question, Jimmy Duvall, you know, doing his makeup for Donnie Darko, is, to me, that was a big personal thing, because that movie means so very much to me. And I'm so glad young people actually see this movie, and it has this huge following, which it's still going strong. It just kind of blows me away. It's such a good movie. Highly recommend it. Anyway, but
especially the makeup.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the story is so, oh gosh, it is so amazing. It's like being in a lucid dream, and there's so much heart and emotion in it. It's just the you know, the music, the soundtrack, everything is just, yeah. And you didn't need to grow up in the 80s to get the movie, but you know.
Yeah. Do you find yourself to be overly critical on TV shows because of how makeup's done? Like, do you say, this would have been better if you done this? Like, do you ever have that? Because you're such a master of the art. I got some pictures I'm going to show people, and I'd like to know a little bit of backstories on it. But
okay,
I've always been curious. It's like, I wonder if he's like,
okay. Once again, this is one of those weird family things where I just remember going to the cinema with my granddad, and he, you know, he'd worked in it like over 30 years. And, you know, he worked back in the heyday, like probably like 48 or 49, I think, you know, when he first kind of started. And so he worked at Warner Brothers. He was friends with Jack Warner. And, you know, he'd seen like, he worked with classic actors, you know, and you know, the greats. And, and films were different. And like, you know, when he was growing up, like him and my grandmother, you know, their big escape because of the Great Depression, you know, people would go and spend all day at cinema, you know. They would get like, you know, a pickle for like 5 cents, or like, I think it was like 3 cents or something like that, or 5 cents for like a big pickle. They'd get other like weird snacks that were popular back then. I mean, I can't imagine going, you know, and getting, you know, and,
wait a second. Hold on. Pickles in a movie are weird.
No,
we have that here. It's normal.
Well, you know, I was at Alamo Draft House, and they had like the fried pickles, and yeah, hell yeah,
those are delicious.
Yeah, amazing. and so I don't have
a giant brine pickle. Yeah, we have them in movie theaters. People eat them like corn on the cob here. It's weird.
Wow, I did not know that. I love the idea of that. I mean, I'm a big dill pickle fan, you know, and pickle relish, and yeah, you know, that yeah, I wouldn't have an objection to that. But anyway, so you know, that was such escapism back then. So, you know, you had musicals and everything. And so my grandfather was hypercritical, and it was weird. I couldn't understand it. You know, like we'd go see a movie, and he was just like, you know, just not impressed. And he goes, oh, you know, when you've worked on as many films as I have, you know, yeah, none of this make, you know, it's nothing new, and it's, you know. And I was like, gosh, I hope I never get like that. And I'm like, oh God, I've got like that. You know.
Oh yeah, you do, huh?
You know, it's weird. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about he'd never seen the movie. Oh gosh, what was it? It had a couple different titles, but it was called Death Dream, and it was one of Tom Savini's early films, and it was about this guy who got killed in Vietnam, but he comes back, you know, like his mother willed him back, and it's like, you know, it's kind of like going over like shell shock.
It's kind of like The Crow.
Kind of, yeah, and like, but like not in a good way. Like he came back, and he started degenerating, and then he would go and he would like drain blood out of people, and like not drink it or whatever, he would inject it into him. So it was kind of a metaphor for people coming back from Vietnam. There was a lot of, stuff about it. So anyway, and so him and I were talking about like the work he goes. So he was interested to see the makeup on this, and it held up pretty good for a super low budget film from like 72 or 3. Anyway, getting back to it, it's weird how, and we were discussing films from even just 20 years ago or 30 years ago, like, watching an episode of DS9 where it's just, it's all, in HD, like it's digitally reproduced, whatever. And I'm like, oh gosh, I can see the lace on the wig, or I can see the edge on the prosthetic. And one of the weird things about a lot of older stuff that we used a product, and we still do, called rubber mass grease paint, RMG, and it's castor oil based, so it doesn't destroy rubber. Okay, and so a lot of makeups, like if you go back to Friday the 13th, the original, like, you've got a throat slashing, so you've got a piece of rubber down here and it's painted. And back then people kind of used a lot of, rubber mass grease. Well, with the color transfer and everything, it'll go gray and kind of dead looking. And you're like, oh, you could totally spot a prosthetic on somebody because, it's not absorbing light and reflecting. But back in the day, it looked perfect. And so I will sit there and kind of pick makeups apart. I don't want to talk crap, but yeah, there's certain things with certain shows we love, where I'm like, okay, that wouldn't have been my decision. When we're not, talking and recording here, I'll mention a couple things.
NDA.
Yeah. There's one strange news show that I love, and some of just the straight makeup, I'm like, interesting choice, and you could discover some other shows and wonder, about the decision on the aliens that they did. Anyway.
Okay, cool.
So you mentioned going towards high definition and things like that. I'm curious, how did that switch affect how makeup is applied to actors? Because it seems like to me it would just become all the more involved and complicated.
It's interesting because, do you remember a few years ago? Gosh, probably. I have a hard time with time because it was 1999, like last year. Okay, so the 2000s. Yeah. But a few years back, the Apple was like doing like some iPhone movie thing, and people were like shooting literally on like Apple phones or something and doing like competitions, and but like our mobile devices, are really pretty damn good, and you can film in like low lighting, etc. And but it's interesting. I know from what I've experienced is makeup shows up as makeup. You have to be very careful, and some of the makeup that we used, like in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s, and like if you go back to kind of like makeup for film, like what was done in the 20s and 30s, wow, I mean, we couldn't do that in the 40s and 50s. That was pretty hardcore, because you dealt with lighting, you dealt with film stock and all sorts of variables. And over the years, makeup has had to change for film. Even just going from Next Generation to Generations, the first film, we had a film and lighting situation because we were using some kind of new film the director was, all about and stuff. And so we had to color shift and make things, work. So it didn't, show up differently. But yeah, it's odd. Like straight makeup itself, like beauty makeup, it's very minimal. And some of the products we're using now are like regular kind of straight makeup, like, regular makeup that women buy,
Oh, wow.
but you still have to be careful about, the, opaquing agents in makeup, like foundations, it's titanium dioxide or titanium oxide. It's white pigment, and it opaques out makeup. So when you see them in the jar, they're really pretty, and when you put them on, what does white do to the light? It reflects it. And so, you've got issues there. And then, but powders, yeah, there was the big thing about talc, and, that's kind of got off the market, and, people don't want to use talc because, they read some reports that, it's bad, and on and on. And so there's like these micro milled things that are being used, like magnesium and some other, types of minerals. And but yeah, it's interesting, because, stuff that's supposed to look contemporary, and like, like men's makeup, you can't do what you used to do on a, man's face, because, sometimes it would be heavy, and you have to just be careful what you're using, or else it looks cakey. And yeah. And then when you are doing prosthetics and hair pieces, it's like, oh crap, there's no room for error, when it comes to that. And but everything's processed, and they can correct a lot of stuff in post. So anyway,
it's a lot different now. Well, I'm gonna pop up some of the cool images and the work that you've done that's up on your IG, and I'd love to know like a little bit of the backstory. This one really got my eye because it was like Geiger-esque, and I thought it was like phenomenal.
Oh, okay, that was for one of the IMATS shows, and that was my friend Seda. And it was me recreating an album cover that Giger did for Debbie Harry, and it was an album called Cuckoo, and it's very New York. It's very New York in the 80s, early 80s, late 70s. There was still that kind of funk feel to it, and it was weird because the promotion for this. A new technology was arising called Laserdisc, and it was the first Laserdisc, I guess, produced, and like entertainment Laserdisc. I mean, they had like Laserdisc promotional things, whatever, but this was like an art piece, entertainment piece produced, from what I remember reading about it. And every song had a music video, and Debbie Harry and her boyfriend Chris, they were huge Giger fans, and they knew him, and he designed like these makeups and like these bodysuits for her, and he did like this whole like sarcophagus of Debbie Harry. And it's weird. There's a song called Backfire. You can find it on YouTube, and it's eerie because, like, it's a song where Debbie Harry's like rapping and stuff, and you like meld that with like Giger and Alien, like so there's this beautiful sarcophagus of her, and it's this like biomechanical Egyptian look, and he has like a table with these giant acupuncture needles, and he's putting them through the sarcophagus with Debbie Harry's face. It's odd. It's just really odd. But anyway, so I always loved the imagery of that, and Giger is one of my favorites, and yeah, so I got to create that, and my dear friend Philip Hera assisted me on that application, and we did it in New York, which was kind of perfect too. Okay, that was promotion at an IMATS makeup show, and that's a friend of mine, Molly, and she was a former student of mine, but it was for this company called Krylon. They're a German makeup cosmetic company, but they have manufacturing plants. They actually manufacture. They have one in San Francisco. They have like their flag stores, across, the U.S. And I've done some promotional work for them. And I did this to kind of showcase effects and beauty. And I used all their products. And so I did a Giger-esque Medusa. And I thought,
okay, cool.
Yeah. So, Medusa, it's interesting taking the Giger biomechanical style and melding it with like Greek mythology. I'm a big Greek mythology fan. And, I get a lot of love from this friend of mine and her husband from Greece. She's a makeup artist in Greece. It's interesting to take those different things and meld them together, kind of like, The Mummy, one of my favorite classic Universal horror films. And boy, if you let me just go off for a second about that, I talked to Sarah Karloff because I wanted to know. Apparently, they shot a bunch of footage and they trimmed the movie down. And if you watch the movie now, it feels like something's missing. Yeah, a ton of stuff's missing. Wow. In the script, they shot scenes apparently, where there was like all the different reincarnations. And so I asked Sarah Karloff if, she knew of any of the footage remaining. She's like, back then they probably just threw it away. And I'm like, oh God, crushing. But The Mummy, they melded, Egyptian with like the Art Deco of the time, like the early 30s. And it was so good. Like, and even back like with Art Nouveau and like, in Deco, they would take like different cultural things and meld them together, kind of like old Chinese art, like classic Chinese art. And they would meld that together with, like a new perspective of it and streamline it into Art Deco. And Greek was a really big thing too. You could see it in New York City, like some of those old Art Deco buildings.
I used to work
have like, yeah. And you've got like the Greek key going on and stuff like that. And it's interesting to like meld things like that together. And for Giger, like it's great. I think that, melding Giger with Egyptian is kind of perfect. But anyway, yeah.
And the last one I want to share is, because we're a Star Trek podcast,
right?
You have this beautiful image here of you, Michelle.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to know how this happened and what led up to
it. Was such a weird, happy accident. I have always wanted to meet her. She was one of the most beautiful women to ever grace television. And I absolutely adore her, and I adored Uhura, and, been a huge fan. And then, growing up, you start learning, oh, wow, she can actually sing, and she had this whole other life and career and just such a fascinating person. And I thought I'd never get to work with her, let alone do her makeup, and I got this random call from a friend saying, hey, Nichelle Nichols is doing this convention in LA. It's going to be her farewell public appearance because of her health. Oh, and I'm like, oh, it's like, I'm like, are you going? He goes, yeah, I'm going to film it, this and that. Would you mind if I gave your number to so-and-so, to, talk to him about, doing her hair and makeup? And I'm like, oh, wow. And I've had that happen in my career a few times where there are people who meant so much to me. And then I get to work with them, and, most of the time it turns out really good. And it's like, it's weird because I've always, try to keep, the spirit of like, being an admirer, or a fan of some, body who's meant something, and that was one of the things like working on Star Trek, it's like, I was a huge fan prior to, And I was told to kind of calm down and not talk about Star Trek, being on Star Trek. And I was like, that's really sad. Okay. Yeah. And so anyway, but I called, I ended up getting the job, and, drove in, went to the hotel, and, I got to meet her and do her hair and makeup, and, just kind of hang out with her and her family. And her family, were just so appreciative, which, that really, that meant a lot. And I was, part of their VIP, group, and they treated me so well. And it's like, do you need anything? Are you hungry? Do you need a water? But they were just so lovely. And Michelle, as frail as she was, she still, she would get these sparks, of what we, imagine her to be from, like, interviews and things. And it was just such an honor. I mean, that, I look back, and I've had those experiences where there are people who I looked up to, and have always wanted to meet and work with, and just out of the blue, it happens, like Grace Jones was another person who, I really never thought I'd meet, let alone do her makeup and hair. It was, wow. Yeah.
The music video, her Demolition Man cover?
No, I did this little film in Romania with her and Tim Curry. And, yeah.
Wow.
And it was called Wolf Girl. And also being a horror fan since a child, and classic horror, Bela Lugosi was, my first introduction to Dracula. It was amazing to go there. It was amazing just to go to Romania, but doing Grace Jones's makeup. And it was terrifying because I had to, everyone kind of approved me. The director liked me, liked my credits, blah, blah, blah. Everyone was like, yeah, but you need to talk to Miss Grace, and so I had to go to her home in New York City at the time. And, wow, I was nervous as hell. I hung out in, the Four Seasons in Austin, Texas with Drew Barrymore, drinking beer and smoking cigarettes. It's like, I've had my career moments, but like meeting Grace Jones in her home, I'm like, ooh, like that was terrifying, because if she didn't like me, I'd be like walking home like in tears. So, yeah, she was amazing, and a beautiful human being, drop dead gorgeous. And it was amazing to have had the chance to work with it, and I feel that way about several people, like Paul Rubens. Once again, I remember, his HBO Pee-wee that he did, the adult Pee-wee kind of stuff, and just totally got it. I was like, this is the most on the spot representation of what it was like to be a child in the 60s, and then like his Pee-wee's Playhouse. I was past the age of what that show parameter was or whatever, and I still watched it, and never thought I'd actually, get to work with him and, hang out with him and stuff. But yeah.
Jace.
Well, oh gosh, I had a question in there, and then you started talking about Grace Jones and Paul Rubens, and it just kind of went.
I'm sorry.
So no, okay, it just came back. So you were talking earlier about how you really enjoyed the melding of the Egyptian and Geiger aspect. Giger, excuse me. I grew up, it was always H.R. Geiger, and then it changed.
Yeah, me too, until he said it. I was like, all right, he knows.
I don't question anybody's pronunciation of anything. So I'm just wondering, if you were in charge of a project and they were told you to meld two different things together, what might you want to meld together into what you think would be an interesting aesthetic?
Like designing something. Once again, I do love, like classic stuff. And I think, once you add that other worldly to it, like the Medusa, the Greek and Giger, and then like the Egyptian and Giger, Aztec and Giger, I would love to do that. That would be crazy. It totally lends itself. I mean, if you look at the lines and everything, and the serpent gods and all that stuff, it's like, yeah, that kind of works, and now someone's going to hear this and do it. Thanks.
All right.
But I mean, once again, it's kind of like paying homage to people who were so, a major part of why you do what you do, and there was another makeup on my IG of this stone god. It was that's what I called him. He was like a man made out of stone. And there was this other surrealist Austrian guy named D.S. Schwarzenberger. I believe that's sorry, there was a gnat that I almost inhaled. It's it's been chilly out here, and I don't know why there's a gnat anyway. So D.S. Schwarzenberger, and he did these crazy, like, hyper masculine, like statue people, and even the women, like, it was rare, but like once in a while, like, you'd throw in like a female version of these aliens, and they were like stone aliens. And oh my gosh, I remember seeing his work in Heavy Metal, the adult comic or graphic novel, that
movie that had the best soundtrack in history.
Oh gosh, yeah. There's one particular part in that I just love. I'm going to put that on tonight. I think it's just, like one of the sequences is just amazing. It's the World War II, with the zombies. That is terrifying. That
scared the hell out of me whenever I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now I want to see zombies like that in a movie. Like, they were, I've got goosebumps. It's like they were terrifying.
Right.
Anyway, where were we? We were talking about D.S. Schwarzenberger. But if you go through the Instagram, there's a couple shots of him, and there's like one where he's doing like the thinker pose. And I took this very muscular guy, to model for me. And then I just built on, and I did a set of teeth with like red LEDs in the roof of the mouth. So when he would open his mouth, it was like fire coming out of his mouth. And that was fun. And these reflective, like blue metallic hard lenses, because, you torture your models and actors.
Yeah.
I remember a pretty famous makeup artist telling me, it's like, yeah, make them suffer. They're getting paid 100 times more than you are.
Revenge. Yeah.
Art is pain. Pain is art, and right, all that stuff. But use it anyway. Oh gosh, but yeah.
One of the reasons we wanted to have you on again is because you are currently doing a GoFundMe.
Yes.
And, times have changed, and some situations in your life had kind of readjusted your life, and people to know what's going on. And if you could share a little bit, I'm going to put up the image that you can go to right now.
All right. It first of all, it's really hard asking for help, because you just feel weird. And I should have done this at the beginning of last year, when I really could have probably saved a lot of headache. But I reached out to a family member for help, and she put me in touch with somebody, and they had this idea to, do what they did. And anyway, so my big thing now is I've got to find a new home. And it's, I'm just getting screwed over, and not having family to go to, and pretty much that just kind of like cinched it. It's personal, and but man, sometimes strangers are kinder than your own blood relation, and that sucks. Work's been, very stagnant. The last few years in the industry have been the worst I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I remember the big actors strike in what was it, like 88 or something like that, 89. And, I just remember all the different strikes that, we've lived through and all the different things, and, lack of work, and then changes and stuff, where we went from doing films like The Grinch, where we had like 50 makeup artists on staff for 7 months, and, like 40, hairstylists on staff for 7 months, and physical sets, and snow machines and all this stuff. And, tons of actors, Coneheads, where we had like 200 people and Conehead prosthetics. And
love that movie.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
So cool.
Yeah, it was such a, I was like blown away to been a part of that. Thank you, David Miller. Anyway, so, what was another, there was a film called North, that the late Rob Reiner, directed. And, we were recreating this scene where we needed like, it was from The Last Emperor, and it was like at this Buddhist temple here in Southern California, and we had like 400 extras in bald caps. And now it's like we could just digitally replace everyone. Everything can be digital, and no one will know. And so, we've had so many changes to our industry, and a lot of them, they've just really affected us crew people. Like even stunts. I mean, there's so many stunts and stuff. Like when you watch a Marvel movie, it's not a stunt man flying across the screen and, in a Spider-Man outfit or something like that. It's CG. And so, people have lost, the ability to work. And then, once again, like I said, we had strike after strike. And then last year we started off 2025 with those horrible fires out here that just kept burning. And it was just horrible to watch, because, you had the Palisades, and you had like Pasadena, Altadena, and then Hollywood. And it was like, it was like a circle around, the wagon, of fire. And I know people who lost everything. Denise Crosby lost everything. So many people that, you love and adore, and who are friends of yours, and you see, everything gone. This one very, very, very famous makeup artist, who took over his dad's company. He lost his home, and he's had that probably, from like 72, and he's, his family, his children grew up there. It's just memories, and stuff. And so that, I know a lot of people, they just couldn't recover, and they moved, and they got out of I know some people who just retired and moved to states that are less expensive, and are trying to figure out what to do with the rest of their life. But luckily I ended up getting a teaching job. It doesn't start till later this month. And I'm trying to rebuild everything. It's been rough. The last 6 years probably have been the roughest in my entire 60 years of life on this planet. So, but yeah, and you never know. You have your ideas and your plans, and you think everything's going, to work out, because it always has in the past. And this was a desperate thing to do, and it was embarrassing to kind of ask for help, but yeah. So here I am. Anyway.
Well, I mean, the good thing about the Star Trek community is when you're in need, they come through.
Yes.
And I leaned on it because my mother passed, and I wasn't prepared financially to handle her final destination. And
yeah,
thanks to Jason and all the wonderful people that I met throughout our time in this podcast, I was able to raise the funds for my mother's funeral. So her homegoing was incredible, and it just amazes me how much love is out there. So I know, and I've seen, because I'm going to show the graphic again, 4,400 of 5K raised. You're so close to your goal. So it goes to show how much love is out there for everybody, and it's coming through to you. So you never feel embarrassed, because
it's crazy, because, you know, I've always told people, because I got involved before ever doing makeup. You know, you and I spoke, Joe, about, you know, my, and Jason, I think, you know, too, like my early days of being exposed to like the world of Star Trek, and my first convention. This teacher I had, Kathleen McCall, she gave me a phone number of her friend that she went to college with, who was a teacher, who ended up, you know, kind of like taking care of her two daughters who were like my age. And this was when I was living in Missouri, and she took me to my first Star Trek convention, and, you know, I met Jimmy Doohan, and, you know, progressively I met like Susan Sackett and Richard Arnold's mom, and then you know, DeForest Kelly, and you know, it was just, you know, I was exposed to like the convention circuit, and seeing how groups of people who are like-minded all came together. And, you know, I've been, you know, fortunate enough to have got to do makeup on the Star Trek cruises, and get to, like, you know, see people I worked with and kind of rekindle friendships and stuff. And so, you know, I've been very blessed, you know, with Star Trek, you know, being a fan to actually working on it, which, you know, not everyone can say. But I'm, you know, seeing with Star Trek, the fans with Star Trek are so much more loyal and to each other, you know, and it's a different world. You know, I've just seen so much community with, you know, the Star Trek family, and I think because of the overall ethics of Star Trek, the morality of Star Trek, you know, and I mean, yeah, you've got some people who, you know, complain that, you know, we're not still writing scripts from 1966, but, you know, it's 2026, you know, and we have, you know, different things going on in our timeline. You know, the stuff 1966, it was controversial, and I think a lot of people miss that, especially if you're growing up as a child, and, you know, you had phasers and a guy with pointy ears and spaceships and stuff. It wasn't, you didn't get that message back then the way as an adult you get messages and stuff, but adults got it, you know, and that's why we're still talking about Star Trek 60 years later, you know.
There it is.
But
Jason, do you have any things you want to ask before we cut out?
Well, just Thomas, it is an absolute pleasure talking to you again. I every time I just kind of sit back anytime you're here, and I just learn.
Yeah.
And that's just something, and I'm not trying to take away from any of our other guests, but it's almost like sitting in a college course that you're really, really interested in. And I just really enjoy having you here. So I just wanted to let you know that.
My new students feel that way.
They will.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
Thomas, I want to thank you again for hanging out with us in the Captain's Quadrant and really sharing your stories, as well as really pushing for your GoFundMe. We're so close. So if you're watching this, please, if you can, whatever you can, it goes a long way. Especially we just have this one little short gap to get through, and then you'll be seen through to your next moment. So I'm so happy that we could help in any way we could, and I walked you through getting the thing up, and I'm so glad.
Technology.
Spent a lot of time on doing it, but I'm so glad it worked out, because they have these little like stop gaps that you gotta go.
Yeah.
But
well, I love you guys, you know, and you know, it just I you know, and it all started with Jason on Instagram, which, you know,
I was just
years ago. You know, I love your, reading of signs.
Well, thank you.
And you're a cat dad. You got to love that. So.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Got little monsters around here somewhere. Oh, there she is. She's destroying something. Okay.
Oh, there it
gosh.
is.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, Thomas. Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for hanging out
Thank
with
you,
us
guys.
again. And be sure to go and click the link below. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, please rate us and click the link below to help this amazing, talented artist get through to his next moment. So live long and prosper, and I know you will be. So we will.
Peace and long life.
There we go. Take care.